a good way. But in Lebanon, they burned the Danish embassy, and they burned also a church. And this is just wrong, because they could have dealt with it in another way.
Shaykh Hamza, Yusuf, what do you think of what?
Well, I personally, I felt that who have trade and commerce. So I just feel that it was completely unfair to blame the Danes.
I wanted to say, may I say what I wanted to say?
Please.
Yes, thank you very much.
Who am I to deny you?
Freedom of speech. In fact, you want very little to provoke reaction when you are carrying the burden of an anguish, when you have a resentment at being humiliated and treated as if you were nothing. We are constantly going to find things that happen, outbursts, and you say, but I mean, why? And many would say, yes, no, we didn't think the reaction should have been so and so. But that reaction is not related to the immediate cause. It is, I am hurting. Please, I am hurting. I have been treated as if I were nothing. Can you take note of me?
All right, thank you very much. Let's go on to another question. This was from Aisha Wakar, please. Could we have your question?
When the Danish government eventually met with Muslims in Denmark, they chose only to meet with the moderate Muslims. Isn't some of the extremism in Islam a result of the frustration born out of the West's desire to have dialogue only on its own terms?
John Esposito, is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that part of the problem that we have historically, I've seen it over the years, is that we hold conferences, whether it's governments, whether it's non-government organizations and universities, and often we talk about people who are not in the room, and we don't invite them in the room. The alternative voices. To give you the most bizarre example, post 9/11, from my point of view, is a situation in the United States at times when you will get a phone call and somebody will say, we want to meet with a group of moderate Muslims, can you give me a list? As if it's a short list. Or we have a group here that wants to go up to Congress and they're Muslim leaders. Can you look it over and let us know whether or not they're moderate Muslims? The reality of it is that what we have to learn when we deal with situations is that we have to talk to a broad spectrum of the population. And so if there's a dialogue implies that it's going on between two people. And if it's about a hot issue, you need to be talking about the people who are at the heart of the hot issue, and not simply talking about...
Dianna Buttu, you find the West picking and choosing its interlocutors, and only the moderate ones?
Absolutely, and in fact that was the point I was going to make, is that oftentimes, particularly for those who live in the Middle East, that our interlocutors are chosen for us, rather than the ability to choose the interlocutor. And hence the case right now with the Palestinian elections, where the Palestinians have overwhelmingly chosen Hamas, and yet there is nobody who's willing to talk to Hamas, despite that this is now the voice of the Palestinians in terms of the Palestinian Authority. And so there's means to go around that. Let's talk to this person, he's much more favorable, we'll see eye to eye with him. But what they're doing, in effect, is they're actually ignoring a large census or a large segment of the population for whom Hamas does
You think they're ignoring them, or just talking to them quietly behind the scenes? All the evidence suggests they are talking to them quietly behind the scenes.
They probably are talking to them quietly behind the scenes for reasons that I think are not necessarily in order to engage in dialogue, but to calm violence down more than anything else. But I think in so doing, what they're doing is alienating a large segment of the population, whether it's in Palestine or other parts of the Middle East or Arab world.
All right, there's a lady 2 rows from the back who's had her hand up for a while.
Muslims who responded so chaotically to the cartoon didn't probably have a clear idea of Islam as a religion itself, of Islam being a spiritual religion. So I personally see it as a failure of the Muslim leaders. I think that if the Ummah was led more towards a specific point by the actual Muslim leaders, the response would not have been that chaotic, because Islam itself does not teach extremism.
Is the problem a lack of central authority in Islam?
authority, well, Islam gives authority to people like mullahs, and so if only those people did took part and they led the population towards the right direction, I think there wouldn't have been such a chaotic response.
Shaykh Hamza Yusuf, the lack of central authority.
It's a major problem because Islam, in its classical formation, recognizes the idea of a caliphate. In the absence of a caliphate, it's just open game in terms of religious authority. So it's a real problem, and we're suffering from it. Great teaching institutions that produced really high caliber scholars no longer exist. And so people in the Arab world know you get good grades, you go to medical school, great grades, medical school, good grades, engineering, reasonable agriculture, political science, really bad grades, you go to Islamic Sharia college. And so we've got a lot of third rate, unfortunately, and with respect, you know, to people and their abilities, but we have a lot of people that are just not up for the level of challenge in the religious sphere.
All right, we'll move to another question, please, from Muna Babikir.
Do you think extremists, like all extremists, are wrong, or are they right at some point?
Dianna Buttu, you seem to suggest that they could be right at some point. At least you were offering understanding to some of them a little earlier.
The Danish products, and this is...
I think I go back to my initial point, which is I think it's very difficult to define what extremism is, because it implies that there is a norm, and that norm is normally set by the more powerful party. That said, I think that it's understandable it's understandable why certain acts take place that people would define as extremism. And it's understandable, particularly in the place where I live and where I see such acts taking place. I do understand why it's happening. It's happening in a political context. It's not happening in the absence of a political context. It's happening because people have been denied their freedom for such a long period of time.
Okay, Desmond Tutu, you were labelled as an extremist in your time, weren't you? Plenty of times.
Yes. I think, I mean, again, the Professor Esposito was right in saying, I mean, contexts are important. But the question was, are they right? Yes, I think, I mean, that there is a measure of truth, and often a great measure of truth. It tends to say it is the only truth, and everything else is wrong. And so, yeah, I mean, I would just hope that one day we can become the kind of people who say, yeah, I don't actually agree with you, but I will defend your right to your point of view, and I won't want to clobber you for holding your point of view. If we could, what an incredible world, how incredibly rich this world would be if we got to accepting that none of us can ever be totally self-sufficient. The way God created us was deliberately to create us as those who need one another. We're created for interdependence. You have gifts that I don't have, and I have gifts you don't have. And you could almost see God rubbing God's hands and saying, voila, now you know that you need the other in order to be fully complete.
All right, there's a gentleman up there. Could you stand up, please, and we'll get a microphone to you, and then we'll come to the panel.
Thank you very much. I have a question, actually, to the Alliance group.
Related to
yeah,
this.
it is, of course, it's related. I would like to see UN treating the problems. For example, when you're treating the disease and illness, you don't want to ameliorate the problems. You don't want to remove the problems or lessen them. You want to treat it. You want to eradicate it. For all this time, we're talking about extreme actions. We're talking about Muslims going extreme and killing. I mean, of course, it's wrong. We're talking about Palestinians blowing up innocent civilians. We're talking about, why don't we talk about why is that happening? Why don't we talk about, for example, what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1992 to 1995?